Before I talk about what happened after Berkeley, I just want to share that during the time that I went to Berkeley, this was the time right after the free speech movement. So a lot of things were going on, a lot of activism was going on. In Berkeley, we were really divided because it was the first time so many minority groups were attending graduate school, this particular graduate school. And so we had a lot of infighting. During the time that I was at Berkeley, we had a caucus, or like a group for each group. So we had the Black Caucus, the Chicano Caucus, the Lesbian Caucus, the Asian Caucus, and all the non-ethnic caucus. So we were always having meetings, always arguing, always unhappy with the program. Because of our activism at Berkeley, we put the School of Social Work at Berkeley on probation. So they were not going to get their accreditation. So they were put on probation. Finally, when they did get their accreditation, when I graduated, I then was approached by the Graduate School of Social Work at San Jose State. And I was hired as their assistant director to their continuing education program.
Maria, what happened after you finished at Berkeley?
After I finished at Berkeley, I was approached by the Graduate School of Social Work at San Jose State to apply for the position of assistant director of their continuing education division. We were developing programs in mental health for the community. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about what I did as an undergraduate. As an undergraduate at San Jose State, there were two things I did that I want to talk about. As an undergraduate at San Jose State, this was about the time of the Chicano movement, when there was a lot of upheaval about Latinos not being served in the community. So as an undergraduate, I was also majoring in social work. And one of the things that I had asked one of my professors was that I wanted to do my field work in an organization that was completely white and that was not providing services to Latinos. He had said they would not accept me because they did not accept people without a master's degree, and because they didn't have a large Latino population. I insisted, and I kept bugging him until finally he did get me in there. There was one Latino family that I worked with, and then once that family stopped coming to the agency, that was Family Service Association. Once they stopped coming, I didn't have anything to do. So I went to my supervisor, and I said, well, what do I do now? And she said, why don't you go out into the community and see what the needs are of the Latino community? So I did a survey, and while I was interviewing all these people in the community, somebody came up with the idea of taking young kids who were getting in trouble, training them to become leaders, and then they could go out and work with other kids that were in trouble. As an undergraduate, one of the classes that I took was with Herman Gallegos on my own. I just sat in his class. And he was a wonderful community organizer from San Francisco. And he talked about how do you go about breaking into the establishment. And at that time, Saul Alinsky was working with Cesar Chavez. So he was a great role model. And So I learned a lot from Herman. As a result of what I learned from him, I started following a lot of what Saul Alinsky talked about. And I started getting to know people on the board. I got all these people involved with me. I started talking about the importance of getting some of this money that was going to this agency and developing a program for Latinos. To make a long story short, members on the board, like the director of the social services agency, Efraim Lugo, who was a social worker at the agency, Dr. Corsiglia, who is very active in the community and also on the board. All of these people decided to support me. As a result, we took it to the board, we got the program approved, it got funded. Then the agency was faced with, who do they hire? And so by default, I became the director of that program. Even though I didn't have some of the skills necessary to be the director, I became the director. So I stayed with that program until I was accepted into Berkeley. That program continued for about 5 years after I left. I went on to, Berkeley went on to San Jose State. At San Jose State, I worked with Dr. Paul Sanchez, Manuel Ares, and Simon Dominguez. And these people were like mentors to me. As an undergraduate, I had worked with them helping to develop the library before they even had set up the Graduate School of Social Work. So I had done a lot of work with them, and so I was familiar with what they were doing. There had also been a lot of controversy because while I had been at Berkeley, a different group had run that program, the Graduate School of Social Work. They were very community-based. They were people that felt that the program should not be just an academic program. It should be a program that involves the community. I don't know all the politics behind it, but as a result, they were not allowed to continue. And then Paul Sanchez and this other group came in, and that's who I came in with. And then we started developing a lot of programs, also for the Latino community, that were community-based. One of the things that we did through continuing education was that we were trying to make the mental health practitioners be much more sensitive to the needs of the community by looking at culturally based services. So as a result, we developed a group of Latino mental health workers to start looking at what were some of these issues. And we developed the Latino Mental Health Association, which then enabled a group to go after the mental health institutions and to talk about what was culturally based and why things were not working. After that, I was there for 2 years,